Hi, I'm Michael Fitzgerald. I'm a contributing editor for digital transformation for MIT Sloan Management Review. I'm here today with Rob Wells, who is the president of the global digital business at Universal Music. Universal is the world's largest recorded music company, and since its acquisition of EMI earlier this year, it's gotten even bigger. But nonetheless, it's been a difficult decade for any company that's been in the recorded music business. They have been not just transformed, but almost annihilated by technology. Recorded music is now coming back. Last year, as an industry, achieved higher revenues than they had the year before for the first time in at least a decade. And so it's an industry that has now, in fact, managed to transform itself to accommodate what's been going on with technology. Rob is going to talk to us about that process, and so we're glad to have him here. Rob, you started out in an industry at a time when email was a mystery to the executives that you worked with. Now you have a title, President of the Global Digital Business for Universal Music. What has that process been like, just from going back to those first days?
I guess you can liken it to more of a roller coaster ride than a career. Every year has thrown up new challenges, new obstacles, new services that come on stream and drag consumers away from a legitimate ecosystem into a non-payment ecosystem. New services arrive, tweaks to existing services, and when you sit where I sit and have a very macro view of the global recorded music business, some territories are way in front of other markets are more challenged. For example, 75% of our business in Germany is still physical.
Would you say you've transformed as a company? I mean, are you transformed into a tech-savvy company?
We are still in the process of transforming, and my role was and is about managing the transition. It's a fancy job title, but it's essentially about finding the new services, finding new revenue streams, business development opportunities. We're kind of at the tip of the spear when it comes to new forms of consumption and new modes of consumption, and then looking inward, there's the whole process of educating the workforce within Universal about the new services, extracting the data from new services, and then using that information for the frontline guys to help break and manage bands.
How hard is the management process? I mean, that story of you in, I think it was 1997 at a different label, having to explain what email was to one of the executives is kind of astounding now. But clearly, this is not a very tech-savvy industry back in the day, at least on the executive side. Are you still explaining basic things, or is it a different industry now?
It's a totally different industry now.
So do you get what is Vine now, or do you get what
sometimes.
Is Snapchat?
Yeah, sometimes, and I'm quite comfortable if they're asking the questions, they're interested, that's great. If there is no interest, then you've got a real problem. And I don't mind sitting down with a label guy or boss or whoever and explaining Xbox Music or what Xbox Live is or what Pinterest is or what Instagram does. I have no issue with that as long as they're asking. The problem comes if they're not asking the questions.
Are you a one-man gang for digital inside Universal?
No, not anymore. I run a team. There are 5 streams within my area. There's a commercial stream. I have lawyers who work for me that cut the deals. We have an account management stream, a technology stream, and a kind of a research and insight stroke data stream. Because of those things it draws interest in from the clients, the people within the labels within the Universal group. It's that interest in what we do it's accelerated over the last 5 years. So it kind of, without a digital strategy, the labels, they can't break bands anymore. So they have to be interested. It's a necessity.
So they understand. And do you feel like you have support from other top managers in terms of what the digital strategy is?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I mean, it's some of the transformational deals that we've done, Universal has done, and we've led with over the last 8 years, has only been possible with belief, specifically from the CEO. And I've had this out with other companies. There are big tech companies that have so far failed to achieve what Apple has achieved in the software client services space. And I've always said to them, this is about your CEO. When Apple started when Apple decided they wanted to launch a download store, it was Steve Jobs that came round and met all the major labels. So it came from the very top. It's unarguable then. No one can challenge that philosophy. So, and I've been very fortunate in that my CEO and chairman he's been a believer.
Well, the one you have now, but certainly when Doug Morris was the CEO, he was far more reluctant. Universal was seen as very sort of chary about moving into even just letting songs be downloaded, right?
I never worked directly for Doug. I've only ever actually worked for Lucien, and he has always been extremely supportive.
You were shepherded in this organization, in the organization when it was split into a North American and an international business, and you were in the international side. It sounds like you had some room to be more creative. Where does digital fit into Universal now as a company? Where is it in the organization?
We are very focused on a global architecture, and we've spent the last 3 years harmonizing all the deals. Because you're right, you know, up to the point at which Lucien took control, it was 2 separate organisations paying, you know, based in 2 separate buildings in different countries. When he took the helm, he gave me the global responsibility. So, you know, I then took on the responsibility of managing the US team, keeping the management of my international team, and I still have, the sun never sets on us. We have a coverage in London, New York and LA. And I spent time harmonizing all the deals. I wanted to do away with this dual structure. And it was, you know, I naively thought it was going to be quite easy. It was actually a lot more difficult because, you know, business practices, there are cultural differences, there are, you know, the US is the biggest music market on the planet, and there are some very solid things that go on here that are unique to the US. So, you know, they have an act called the DMCA, which enables services like Pandora to exist. That doesn't exist outside of North America. So it's, you know, the vision was always to bring it together, and we've done that, but it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to take.
What were some of the challenges with making that happen?
I think culturally, you know, the US tends to be a very litigious market. So, you know, it was some of the deals that we'd done in international, they viewed as being quite reckless because you know that they may have had some sort of exposure if they'd have been done in the US. There was a lot of resistance and you know, change reluctance in the US. But it's, you know, overall it didn't take long for my US colleagues to adapt to the new regime. It was, you know, it's once you see what you can achieve by changing the business and licensing more freely, it's kind of like, oh, that's actually working.
So when you came in and you had this merged company, was everybody on board within top management, or were there some conversations you had to have to pull people along? Or did you have to kind of say, well, Lucien's for this, so we need to do this? How did you guys manage the process of saying we're one company now, and this is the way we're going to do things?
It was coming from the CEO's office. It was, you know, it was mandated from the most senior level within UMG. There was never any sort of politics. It was just kind of like, explain this to me. And that was a lot of what the first year was about. It was tough. I was the first guy that was relocated to Los Angeles after the chairman dropped here.
So you're kind of a champion. Do you have a sort of champion strategy here? I think you've mentioned elsewhere that you like to use champions within the organization to spread ideas.
My view on you know, execution of a corporate-wide strategy is you get people on board slowly. You infect them like a virus. And I've rolled out, you know, 2 or 3 platforms within UMG, and it's not easy. On a global scale, it's very tough to implement and execute a platform strategy. And it's very, you know, having done it, you kind of like, you identify people who you know will be empathetic with a platform or new software, and you target them. And you give them free rein for a period of time and let them come back, adjust it, tweak it, give it back to them. And you have to be very fleet of foot and very nimble. And then as soon as they're using it and it's changing what they do on a daily basis, they start to talk.
Is there a part of the organization that has been traditionally more resistant? I think of the business as kind of a gut feel A&R kind of business where, you know, we hear it and we know. Maybe they are a little more resistant to technology. Or?
Yeah, I mean, there are ways you can get around that as well. You know, that I wouldn't single out any one area. You know, certain territories can be quite precious because it's kind of like, you know, this is not, you know, this is my market. You don't, but you don't grind them down. You just kind of, you slowly prove to them that what you have can actually help them in their daily lives. And one of the things that, everybody who works in the music industry is familiar with is charts. So you start to produce charts and not humiliate them, but it's kind of like, well, your performance in this is not as good as your performance in this, and you're below that market, which is actually smaller than you are, and they're doing way better at that than you are. So you need to, it's kind of, charts is a very useful way of doing stuff within the music industry.
Let's talk about deals. Deals are a big part of what Universal does, and it was a company that was reluctant to even allow downloading at one point. I know that you did this sort of groundbreaking deal with Nokia a few years back. How did that deal come about?
To their credit, Nokia actually, they brought it to us. They came to us with the concept. It was at the time they were the world's biggest device manufacturer, shipping about 450 million machines on an annual basis. I think 120 million of them were capable of playing music. They had a huge stranglehold on specifically developing markets. Their market share in India at the time was somewhat ridiculous, like 90%. But they made these phones that were relevant to the market. The two most important reasons for buying a device in India at the time was, one, it was dust-proof, and two, it had a torch. So it goes to show, what the triggers were for purchasing in that market at the time. And they came to us and they really wanted a music strategy. And they pitched this idea. I fell in love with it. It was kind of from a consumer's perspective, because whenever we engage with a partner, we look at the service or the opportunity through two prisms: consumers and artists. If you can tick both those boxes, it's definitely a winner. It took some time because it was just so groundbreaking and brand new, but we finally closed after about 12 months of negotiating.
So Comes With Music was seen as sort of a spectacular failure, at least for Nokia. Was it a success for Universal?
Massive success for us. I look back and what they actually managed to achieve was invigorate some of the markets where we hadn't actually had a business before. It failed dramatically in Western Europe, but it was crucified by the operators in Western Europe. They didn't believe that Nokia should have a strategy that brought them closer to their consumers. There was this war going on, and I wasn't too sure what Nokia's overall strategy was with the service, and I probably naively believed they just wanted to get into the content business. So I think probably what was really true was they wanted to get closer to the billing end. But in other emerging markets, especially in India and Russia and China, PRC was hugely successful for us, and it's still live in China. So it's still a big revenue stream for us in some of these markets. So a lot of the uninitiated and people that don't actually truly understand the global nature of the business think that it failed. For us, it was a massive success.
What was the hard part of making the deal happen? Did you have to really sell this hard, or did people also get it as quickly as you got it?
Whenever we engage with a partner, there are two negotiations. There's a negotiation we have with the partner, and then there's an internal negotiation stroke conversation to prove the value of the deal to the business. And that's really healthy. That's a great thing to have. So I have two heads. I deal with the partners, and the way we treat the partners as well is the negotiation is the start of a journey, and we never sit down with them and say no to anything. It's kind of like, okay, we can't do that, but how about we do this instead? And because as soon as the starting pistol goes off and they go live, you then have to trade with these people for the foreseeable future. So there's no point having a punch up in order to get a deal done. That's not how Universal does these deals. Because after the service has gone live, you're going to use that service to sell records, break bands, collect data, and then internally, the challenges that come with introducing or presenting a new concept or service to a senior management team is healthy. The debate is extremely good. It flushes out stuff.
So what were the risks that people were concerned about what comes with music?
It was fear. It was based around someone going in, buying a machine, going to the service, and dragging down more than the value of what we'd actually been paid. And I never saw that as a threat, and it never materialised. From my perspective, before we'd even done the deal, it was kind of like, consumers don't behave like that. It's kind of, they have a finite amount of time. There isn't one button that says download everything. They have to go in, invest their time in clicking every album on it's just impossible. And we, as soon as the service went live, because it was the first service of its kind, you got some people that were really testing it. And I remember reading a blog post from a guy that had spent something like 48 hours doing nothing but clicking the download button on all these different albums, and he just gave up. He was like, it can't be broken. It clearly is unlimited. Because that was the big thing, it was an unlimited service. And once it was live, we then worked out, and we've actually based a lot of our mass consumption models on the back of what we found in that service. With the time constraints over a period of 12 months, the average amount of tracks downloaded on a monthly basis is about 45. Because people it's natural. You get this inverted bell curve, because the first month they glut themselves and they slowly realise that, okay, it's kind of, and then it levels to it plateaus at a certain level of 10, 15 tracks a month. And then at the end, as they realise their subscription is about to expire, they start to re-glut themselves. And then they re-up. I mean, one of the things it did do was drive more consumers to repurchase Nokia Comes With Music devices.
What kind of deals would you say you're doing now that you would not have done before Comes With Music?
A lot of the brand new deals, the unlimited models. It was a challenge. The whole Spotify stroke streaming subscription, single track streaming subscription services were born from that thinking. And there are offices in the London-based HQ for UMG where we sat and noodled with the Nokia guys. I remember there was a 2-week period where we basically just locked ourselves in a room, and we just had whiteboards, and it was like post-it notes, and it was like a real kind of brain trust. Everyone was working through, and we never saw them as, we always saw them as a partner. So we'd throw up an issue and it'd be like, oh God, what about that? They would help us fix that problem. And that's how we go about negotiating all of these deals. And we've just come out of a round of negotiating with our friends in Sweden about the Spotify service. And the same thing happened there. It's kind of like, it's a very creative deal-making process. I love that.
Are there deals that you don't do? And what does it take to not do a deal?
We haven't not done a deal with a partner. Again, to the point, if someone comes in and says, we want to do something suicidal, it's kind of like, we can't do that for these reasons, but what about this?
Well, what would be a suicidal deal? I mean, at this point, right, you guys have done all kinds of deals, right?
Back to those two prisms,
yeah.
It's either going to be way too expensive for the consumers to even bother with, problem, suicide, or it's going to be not rich enough for the artist community, again, suicide. So you have to balance those two focal points.
Music as an industry, Universal and other companies like it, exist in effect to create music, but also to distribute music. Mm-hmm. And the deals that you're doing with Nokia or Spotify or whoever, those kind of do they change the model? Does it become less of a distribution model and more of we're focused on music? How does it affect the company?
These new models are completely revolutionary. The single track a la carte model is much more aligned with the physical sale, the CD sales model. These models are much more based around usage. So in a world of digital ubiquity, how do you get cut through for bands and artists? And all of these challenges we're dealing with now, because these services are starting to become very, very mainstream, especially in certain Northern European markets. But to the point, those markets are fast moving towards being way healthier than they've ever been.
From a revenue perspective.
From a revenue perspective.
So you see light at the end of this. The light at the end of the tunnel is not a train.
No, definitely not. Yeah. It's daylight. From
a deal-making perspective, do you have to be personally involved in any digital deal that happens, or is it pushed down on the organization?
For the big partners, I tend to be very heavily involved. The last deal we did with Apple was for their iTunes radio service. That was pretty much me and one lawyer that was engaged with the Apple guys around that. But some of the deals, I rely on my immediate team. They tend to call me in the event there's a problem or a breakdown.
It's pretty centralized from a structural perspective that way.
Yeah.
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 Is that? Do you think that's a good thing?
The local markets the opcos are encouraged to do their own domestic deals as well with domestic partners. They have terms of reference, and if they want to do a deal that's outside of guideline, then they come in, and again we then have to have the debate, and what are they doing to get a reduced rate, and are they going to spend money on marketing, and how are you going to break bands, and again it's never a no conversation. It's a conversation about educating the local, and we empower the territories. I see them they're just for the domestic, for the big global deals, and it tends to be my team that does it.
Have you had any deals that raised eyebrows at the board level?
All the time.
Yeah. What's an example of one?
We sliced the deal with YouTube, and we finally closed in January this year. That took some time. There was a healthy debate about that.
Give me a synopsis of the deal and what raised the eyebrows.
What can I tell you that isn't confidential? You know, we have some challenges, existing challenges with the YouTube platform in terms of, you know, the level of usage on YouTube compared to the remuneration to us as a record company.
What technology matters most internally in terms of being able to accommodate this new digital world?
What's becoming increasingly more important to the frontline people, the people that really matter within the organisation, the decision makers, the label presidents and MDs of territories, is the information flow. You know, these new deals and services, what we receive from them in terms of consumer information and sales information and stream data is infinitely richer than what we've had previously. So, analysing and crunching that information in a real-time environment empowers them to focus their marketing money on things that really actually do make a difference. The vision for me, Michael, is band X comes off stage at Coachella or Reading or Glastonbury, goes back to their trailer, puts the towel around their neck, opens an iPad or laptop, calls up the database and sees in real time exactly what their performance has done to streams on Spotify, likes on Facebook, tweets on Twitter. You know, that is the digital world.
What about things like mobile as a platform or social media? How important are those within the technology realm for Universal?
Enormous on two levels. One, it's very important for us from a monetization perspective. You know, new distribution platforms. It's, you know, something ridiculous like, you know, there's an a la carte store run by a big US-based tech company. 93% of all their transactions occur via mobile phone. 93%. I mean, that's a demographic indicator as to who's shopping at that store. Huge. Secondly, the second thing that's very important to us when it comes to mobile is marketing. You know, you know, consumers are accessing their social networks, their music services more and more via mobile, and presenting them with the new releases, the new artists, the new cool stuff. That's very key.
Spotify is kind of like social media with music combined. You've long been a champion of Spotify. At the start, why were you so keen on this service?
For a number of reasons. I thought the technology was extremely good, and I'm not immersed in the tech, but what I'm a very heavy user, massive gamer, Xbox Live, Call of Duty player, huge music consumer. I buy all my movies from I'm that, and I saw the product that they have, and I was like, I like that. We thought the Nokia thing was going to work. They got, you know, it failed. We finally found something that was so new, so innovative, and so outside of the Apple wheelhouse that I just wanted to throw my entire weight behind it. I was like, that. I personally like that. The consumers will like that, and I think the artists will like that.
Why was it better than, you know, Rhapsody or Pandora or Last.fm or these other kind of social platforms that were sort of all bubbling up at the time?
There was something unique about the interface. The fact that you could click on a track and it started playing straight away was new. There was no buffering, and when we got into this with them, it was kind of like, well, they dialed down the actual quality of the sound file at the first few bars of the track so that it could play. But your ear was deceived because by the time you actually caught up, the track was playing in much better quality. So they had all these kind of, you know, the cache on the mobile phone caps out at about 3,500 tracks. If you load your phone full of tracks, rather than it come back to you and say, your cache is full, your memory's full, delete tracks, they auto archives, you know, the whole experience was geared around the consumers. I loved it.
How hard was it to sell to the board?
Yeah, tough.
So the pushback came. What were the pushback, and how'd you get around it?
The sell was, it was only going to go live in a handful of markets in Europe. It was a petri dish. You know, we were using it as a petri dish. You know, there was kind of zero risk. A lot of the deals that we do were very short term. You know, experimental arguments. You know, it was You know, we had equity in the company, so we were protected in the event they exploded. You know, and the deal that was structured at the time was loaded full of these insurance policies, and that was enough to get the guys over the line.
And what's been the impact?
I'm cautious because I'm generally seen in the industry as the Spotify guy. I think for me, you know, whilst I love their technology, the actual notion of subscription for music for me really resonates. And I'm not a Spotify guy. I'm a subscription guy.
They have, I looked at the numbers, the last numbers they published, that they have about 24 million registered users. It feels to me like that's a pretty small number compared to the number of iPods that are in the market. Why is Spotify, I mean, you know, you're not the only one who loves Spotify. They're big in terms of buzz. But they don't seem that big in terms of reach. Explain to me why they really matter. It
seems that their addressable market is, you know, where they are at the moment is quite small. They haven't spent, just to make the point, they haven't spent a dime on marketing. Their marketing money goes in powering their free service, and the rest of their money comes in, the rest of the marketing effort comes in bundling their service with operators. And when they bundle it successfully with an operator, that's when we start to see real lift in a market. They did it in Sweden with Telia, they've done it in other markets as well. It's, you know, that's when we start to see it really take hold. And in some of these more mature Spotify markets, and bear in mind, you know, they've only been live 7 years, 6-7 years, I believe. You know, in Sweden, they've penetrated, you know, their mass market in Sweden, something ridiculous like 60 or 70% of 18 to 24-year-olds are using Spotify Premium. You know, most of the people going into Spotify in Sweden now are going straight into Premium, not even going through the free services. So what do you see it for the future, though? I mean, in terms of its impact on, I guess, on Universal and the music industry, but also as you look at, you know, I mean, Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine have a service that they're going to have. Apple is doing a radio streaming service. Where do we go with this? I love the fact that consumers have huge choice, and I personally think that a lot of these services can happily coexist. From a demographic perspective, you know, it's Google Play have an a la carte store. They have a subscription model with Google All Access. Apple have an a la carte store. They have a subscription service with iTunes Match. They have the radio products. You know, you have Pandora for you know, the kind of like the really kind of sit back consumers. You have a whole host of, the consumer choice is something that's driving the business forwards. And I love these services that when they compete, I love them competing for new releases. I love them coming to us and going, we want that record before anybody else. I love to feel like an arms dealer. I love to feel like the guy they have to come to in order to kill their, that's when we know that we've won. The main thing they have been competing with over the past 5-10 years, pirate services. And if we can get the consumers onto the legitimate services and off the pirate services,
it's transformational for the revenue.
Correct.
Of your company. Yeah. So do you think it's going to get there?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
How much time do you, as a manager, get to spend working on things that you think are going to be innovative, transformative?
God, that's a great question. Not enough. I'd love to be able to have, you know, a day a week just on new tech, new platforms. You know, it's the cut and thrust of daily business is just, it's very noisy. You know, I do devote some time to it. I organise management retreats for my immediate reports once or twice a year. We have a global digital conference every quarter. There's about 40 of us that sit down. We fly the guys in from Southeast Asia, from Greater China, from India, from the European markets, from Scandinavia. And we all sit and, you know, we talk about new services, and that's very, you know, so I probably do spend more than the average exec, but this is where I live. You know, it's never going to be enough. Even if I did it 5 days a week, it would never be enough.
Do you have what you consider to be a digitally savvy executive team now? In your company, is that true across the music business?
The UMG senior exec team is way more digitally savvy than other senior exec teams. You know, there's a lot that having kids can bring. You know, your kids are the ones that they immerse themselves in new technologies and new platforms, and then there's the dialogue at the dinner table, and you know, and all the senior managers have kids of that age. You know, and again, to the point, the fact that they're interested and ask questions, that's, yeah, I'd say we're in a very good place, very good shape with the management team here.
What's the hardest part about actually making something transformative go from wow, that's cool to wow, we're doing it?
We've signed so many deals over the years that have basically been loaded full of hope, and then they go live and fail miserably. And I could write a textbook on what you need to have in order to make it work. You know, not just the kind of the ethereal stuff like hope or the actual physical stuff like a great UI. You know, if you're part of a bigger corporation, a lot of it is about the corporate belief. You know, everybody in the organisation has to be behind it. You know, I look at some of these big global device manufacturers now and just, it makes you want to weep because they've just got no, you know, I've heard it from senior execs in some of these companies that you know, they don't want to be chasing Apple. And I'm like, well, you know, if you want to lead, then you have to do brave things, and it has to come from the most senior person in your organisation.
It sounds like you and the CEO are on the same page here, and you're on the board now, so you've got some executive heft pushing digital. Do you have to manage down to get people on board with things?
No, I think the valuable people in this organisation, the people that actually make the difference in terms of signing and breaking bans, they look at what we do in the digital space. I mean, I was getting calls when the iTunes radio service was announced. You know, I was getting calls from label MDs in the US and territory MDs, and they were like, "Oh, this is going to be great." So it's never had to be a hard sell. These people are really hungry for new services. They're really hungry for places to place their music and help them break bans. So that's never been a tough challenge.
You said that the business is not yet where it needs to be truly a digital business. Where do you see it going in the future?
We're going to see huge growth from subscription on a global basis. You know, if we mapped what's happened in Sweden onto the US, Spotify alone would be a $1.3 billion account for us in the US. And that, I see that as an inevitability. At some point, that is definitely going to happen. Whether it's just Spotify or a collection of subscription services, who knows? You know, I think subscription will be you know, a segment of our revenue for the next 10 years. A la carte will continue because some consumers just are happy with ownership. They tend to be the older demographic. Some consumers will be happy listening to radio services, whether it's iTunes Radio or Pandora or iHeart or whoever. And then some consumers will still want to buy physical. And in a world of digital ubiquity, there is still space for a physical, for atomic product, without a shadow of a doubt. You know, things, the artifacts and collectibles, the stuff that you give to your dad at Christmas, there's nothing better than the Pearl Jam box set with the liner notes and a lithograph and a guitar pick. And, you know, for me, that still resonates. And even for 21-year-old college students, it still resonates. And the beauty of it is consumers are paying for every single one of those streams, whether it's they're paying a subscription, they're watching adverts on a freemium service, they're paying for a la carte downloads, or they're buying atomic product. There's just more places where they can actually drop coin. It's great.
We're heading towards a blended business for digital music. I've been here with Rob Wells of Universal Music. I want to thank him for his time. I want to thank you for being with us. This is Michael Fitzgerald for Sloan Management Review saying see you again soon.